Okay, and we're back with another episode. Today I got Steve Stratton, good friend of mine, fellow author. He's got his second book out called Shadow Sanctions. See if I can get it in frame here. There it is. It's coming out here in August 30th. Steve, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, yeah. We were just chatting it up about the weather and about snakes in different areas and stuff like that. But how's life in Colorado right now?
Life is good. It's just very strange weather too. We've been getting weather patterns, both from the north and the south. Like last night, the storms pushed up from the south, and real stormy hail. We like to do hail here in Colorado, especially on what we
Yeah,
call the Front Range in Denver, on the way to Kansas and stuff like that. And it's funny, it's how isolated it can be because it's booming and thundering and lightning's flashing everywhere, and we're not getting any rain at all. We're just like, okay, it's right around us, just not here today. This storm, but
yeah.
everything's so green, way up high, up into the mountains, and like we were talking, I'm not sure, the normal process for the forbs and grasses to brown out and the animals to move down lower. I'm not sure when that's going to happen this year, but
Yeah, it
it's
might
all
be a
good.
little bit different of a hunting season with everything so lush like that. It just might be, might
Yeah.
push it back a lot, which is harmful because it's not like they go, oh, hey, let's slide the hunting season a little bit. You just miss out on that time.
Yeah. They actually here in Colorado significantly reduced the number of tags they gave out because the winter was so bad and a lot of killed. But I'm telling you, the ones that survived and the new babies and stuff like that are eating high on the hog, so to speak, here
Yeah,
this year. It's just so fundamentally different with the weather pattern. So,
yeah, it messes with like here in Oklahoma. Like sometimes October for deer will be nice and cool, and sometimes it'll still be 90 something degrees. And 90 something degrees, they're not out walking around that much. They're staying in the shade, so it's hard to hunt, but they don't adjust the hunting season or anything like that. Like you're just sitting out there eating tag soup night after night going, I would pray for a 75-degree day right now because
any kind
you
of cool front to get them up and moving, right? Yeah, because
yeah, and the worst thing about October is youth there's like a youth hunting week in October that they specifically want young kids getting out and outdoors, and sometimes it is just a total crapshoot, and it's like that's kind of disappointing, but yeah, it can be October can be brutal around here.
yeah, you combine that with the moon phases, right? And those animals just love eating with the moon out. They,
Oh
they
man.
they like a good bright moon as much as we do sometimes. And yeah, I've hunted elk in southern Colorado before. Fort Carson has a big maneuver area, tens of thousands of square miles big in southern Colorado, but it is hot, and you're seeing animals, right. You see them for a couple of minutes, right as first hunting light shows up, and that's about it. Unless just walk into where they live, bed down, and try and ambush them or something. And it's like it gets a little bit combative at that point, running
Yeah, I
around.
didn't I didn't realize like what Colorado was made up of. Like I thought, it's just cold and it's just mountains. But driving in from the south or from the east, it's that high plains like desert, and you just don't expect, um, the that kind of like wildlife and that environment you expect. Rolling hills and we're getting up to the mountains and blah blah blah. And it's just southern Colorado and eastern Colorado is a lot different until you get closer to like Colorado Springs and Denver line.
Right.
Things don't change as much, and it's just and it's flat. It's flat.
Yeah, we're
It's
in
pretty
northern.
flat.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We're a northern extension of Arizona, New Mexico, right?
Hmm.
And Alpine Desert, they call it. And I'm like, isn't that a contradiction? When I first moved here, I was like, that's a weird term, but it definitely fits.
Well, and there's a lot of antelope out there too, which is fun hunting, but very very challenging, especially when it's flat. I mean, you can just see for miles. Well, so can they, So We used to see antelope by the Colorado Springs airport all the time, and they were just sitting out there chilling by the road, looking at you like, can't get me out here.
Yeah, there's housing all around Buckley Air Force Base, which is here,
Yep.
and there's housing everywhere, but you'll still see herds of 20 or 30, even along E470, the sort of toll road beltway around Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, those things. It's funny that they're really got good sharp eyesight. I learned my first year last year hunting them, you know, keep the truck, keep my bright silver pickup in enfilade, behind the top of the ridge, because as soon
Yeah.
as they see it, they know like it's time to leave. But it was funny. The females are so much more perceptive. It's like the males are perceptive, but like 30% less. I was able, of course, I had a doe tag, but I was able to walk up, get within 75 yards of some males, but the females had already sensed something was going on. There's some knucklehead crawling around the dirt out there, and had scooted off. So
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting though. The wildlife here in a day, like when Ellie and I go up to our cabin, we'll see speed goats as we call them, or antelope. We'll see deer. Depending on the time of day, we'll see elk, and we've even seen moose. And that's just you know 86-mile drive to the cabin kind of idea. So lots of wildlife here, and so far I have not. I've seen plenty of coyotes, but no wolf yet. But
Well, that's good because wolves are one of those species that have to be kind of managed because they can easily, mess up an elk herd, and just become a problem. So, you
yeah,
know, it is what it is. I know that the further north you go, like in Wyoming and Montana and all that, they start to have a lot more issues with that. So, I've read up about them introducing wolves and then pulling them back out and kind of helping manage the herd that way because it's a very difficult thing to do. And it's not even about hunting; it's just about the preservation of a species. Because wolves can be so, you know, they'll hunt for food and they'll hunt for sport. And that's where it becomes dangerous to an entire elk herd because they could just wipe them out and that's dangerous to the preservation of life and very, very difficult. So if you're any kind of conservationist and you're listening, hunting is not just about killing and filling up the freezer. It's about helping the natural balance of life because it's very important to sustain it. That certain things happen, but it is what it is. They're calling for a very cold and stormy winter here, so I don't think hunting season is going to be all that great. I think we're going to be hot until like mid-September, and then a switch is just going to flip, and then we're going to be miserable until about March.
yeah. 2 years ago, I hunted on the Colorado-Wyoming border in like late December, and it was the coldest I'd ever been in my life. and and the elk were way far away on the other side, the wrong side of the fence, like in somebody's private property,
Of
and they know
course.
that they play those games. But yeah, it's a beautiful state, and I love getting out into the woods, whether it's camping, hiking, on a dirt bike,
Oh
on
yeah.
some old trails or logging trail, whatever it is. I just love being outdoors, and it sort of recharges my batteries, and actually helps me really. I get some of my best ideas when I'm out there in that mode. I literally carry a notebook, stop, be on my dirt bike and stop in the middle of a ride and start jotting notes down because it's just my mind is so open to the beauty of nature that other things flow in. So it's a great time.
Well, there's so much to kind of like as a writer you look at and you have to explain in your writing in your words what is being seen but people can't see it because it's just black and white pages. So I find myself taking a lot of pictures of things and kind of taking mental notes so that I can go back and look at those pictures. So when I'm trying to explain something, and I'm sure you do this too, that you can find a way of saying it without it almost kind of being said. Like you don't want to be too corny in the way you say, uh, the sunrise is coming up, but you want to say it to where people can kind of picture it in their head. And, several authors have said this before, and Brad Doors told it to me recently. Like, the worst thing you want to do is start off with the weather. But you know what? It's true. But sometimes it is a pretty big point within certain chapters, if you want to put it out. But you have to say it without it being said, So it's a very difficult thing to do. But, just taking those mental notes and kind of observing how you saw it and what you're currently seeing so you can use it later is hugely important. So what do you do kind of other than that to kind of capture some of those things so that you can go back and put them into words later?
Well, I too like taking pictures of scenes and areas and things like that. I also, um, as a young kid, I was always out in the dirt and the mud and things like that. And I'm literally one of those kind of guys that'll grab up some dirt or scrub, or if it's underbrush from trees, and crush it up and smell it, to get the sense, because like in Southern California where eucalyptus is completely different smell than in the redwoods, or
Mm-hmm.
up here with all the pines, you know, in Colorado and things like that. And so I think that's important. And when you and I were at ITW, I got really lucky to sit down uh, with a couple of great authors, Tony Tata and Taylor Moore, and who both are really good at using the environment, the scene as another character, right?
Yeah.
And learned a lot just sitting down and talking with them. Um, and it's one of those things that has to become muscle memory in our writing. But yeah, it it really, if I can bring it to life for myself, I think, and like you say, it doesn't sound corny about this beautiful, gorgeous red ball of whatever that's coming
Yeah,
up
yeah.
over the sea or something like that. Yeah, you know,
That's the
as
worst
we
thing
know,
about.
it's right. It's the right words. It's not the word count, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's the worst thing about reading a military action spy thriller or something like that, and you turn the page and they start talking romantically about the sun, and it's like, oh, like, come on, like there's some of that kind of just kills me. But at the same time, like, you have that's a part of pacing too, because that can slow down momentum in a snap of some fingers in the first sentence. You could be going and going and going, and then that page flips and you start a new chapter, and then you kind of just hit the brakes, and then you could just throw people off. Like, it's so delicate how you have to write. And just talking from all these different authors, we were at Thriller Fest, we talked to Andrews and Wilson, a lot of these other guys. Went to lunch with Taylor Moore, he was awesome, Jerome Preisler, and Stephen Hartov too. But there's so
Mm.
much that you have to be aware of when you're writing, that it's like, it's almost, you have to write and edit at the same time to make sure you're not making some of these mistakes, because the last thing you want to do is kill momentum right in the middle of something awesome, and it can happen.
Yeah, my style is to overwrite and then edit and say, okay, how can I distill this down so I've not like come to a screeching halt, like you say, in my pacing or something like that.
Yeah,
And what is the right way to evoke, that the sun's high and it's hot as hell? Is it, sweat trickling down a neck, right? It's not saying it's just, the sun's high and it's hot as
yeah.
hell.
It's
you know,
applying it, yeah, because we all
yeah,
know
yeah,
what that feeling is.
yeah, yeah. Show don't tell, but in plenty of different ways with the different senses, right? And yeah, that's something I continue to work on,
Yeah, me
because
too.
it's all in my head. I can see it, but
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I see the movie.
yeah,
I can hear the script, I can see the trailer, I can see it all, but that doesn't matter. It's just black and
no,
white words.
well,
You have to get that on there, and like you said, that sweat trickling down the back. Somebody walks outside and their teeth immediately start to chatter, and they can feel the pulse of their lips starting to turn blue. I mean, you're saying it's freezing cold without even saying those words. It's finding that.
right, right, because I don't want anybody in my head. This is scary enough place for me to transverse.
Right? Yeah. Let's keep
Nobody else
that door
needs to
locked.
come in here and be shocked and grossed out. So
So last year, you put out Shadow Tier, first Lance Werewolf, Beowulf book, and excellent offering, fantastic cover, great story, lots of action. And then since then, you've been working on the second one. We went to Thriller Fest. And what has the journey been like to this second book?
well, it's interesting. When I first signed with my publisher, Force Poseidon, he was very honest with me and said he had a bit of a backlog. And I said, okay, well, you've accepted this manuscript. I'll keep writing. And so when we came back around, I actually wrote, because, to be honest, revenge books are fairly easy, right? The character development is dark and it's revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not homey and it's not a lot of fun. So then I wrote a second book that was actually somebody else taking revenge on Lance. And my publisher's like, well, we probably shouldn't do two back to back. So I started on the book that is this book, and got good half of it done as Shadow Tier was being published and working that. And it was the problem, if I was to say there was a problem, was my writing wasn't back then where it is now, just from natural osmosis, going to Thriller Fest,
Yeah.
doing my mentorship with Jerry Jenkins, all these other things that I did to try and improve my craft. And so I had to go back in and make sure I was setting the scene, leaving the scene appropriately, making somebody want to read on. And show don't tell was a big thing for me,
Mm-hmm.
to not to conceptualize, but to put on paper.
Yeah.
And so this book, I finished it up and then really had to do a heavy edit on it, and it improved it significantly. Um, I still fight this urge to create these complex Clancy-like stories. I'm not delving into the politics of the Politburo in the old Soviet Union,
Yeah.
but and like Rainbow Six, right? I read, as I was writing this book, I was re-listening to Rainbow Six, and that's 35 hours of listening,
Yeah. It's
just for one
huge.
book. And
The
it's like,
book is
really?
4 inches thick. I mean, it's
I know
huge.
I've got it back there. It takes up, half of a shelf.
Yeah.
And but I do like weaving complex stories together. I've been told I need to have maybe less characters. Um, in this book now, I've got not just Lance and technically one squadron of, assaulters. Now I've got three, right?
Mm.
He starts the third one, or has his good friend Kennedy starts the third one in England, a little homage to Rainbow Six, to be
Yeah.
honest,
That's cool.
right? Yeah. And so now I've got action going on. It's now, first book was 98. Um, and funny side story. One of the hardest things about writing that book was remembering the tech that we had back then compared to now.
Yeah.
98,
Scaling
right?
things back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As a special forces radio man, we would just move beyond doing doing a leg key and doing Morse code,
Mm.
and got this digital device and SATCOM radio that we could actually fit on our back instead of in a Navy ship, things like that. And so the second book takes place in 2003. And what I wanted to do was involve and talk to, not in a political way or to try and make a statement, but bring up the idea that we went into Afghanistan, right? We cleared out the Taliban. It's 2003 now. All the president's starting to think about Iraq, and units are being pulled out. Right? It's becoming a NATO thing, and there was no DEA presence in the country that was full time. People would come in and things like that. And our good friend Jeff Higgins had not started all the great work he did and led as a DEA agent in Afghanistan yet. So the counter drug war in Afghanistan. So I use that as the president literally tells Lance, you need to stop that flow of opium because the Taliban are making 400 million a year. off this, and they're funding their terror network. And true story. And I've got a lot of good sources. I'm sort of like Jack Carr. I end up with a book stack like about this thick when I'm
Yeah.
doing research on books, and a lot of good books on that, and some other things. And so one day out in the woods, I wrote a note down. For some reason, the French connection comes to me. So I've got Afghanistan, Kandahar, where a lot of opium was grown, and then also Marseille, because that's where the French connection, the real French connection was, not the Gene Hackman Popeye Doyle movie, but the real French connection built out of a Union Corsa, a mafia group. And so it made sense in the book that I would connect the opium would travel through different routes and get to Marseille, uh, sometimes processed, sometimes as raw gum material, morphine gum, things like
Yeah.
that. And so I started connecting these dots. Lance has trouble at home, so to speak, on the Crow Reservation, because what I do in my books, I bring in real life things into the books as elements of the book and fictionalize them. For example, cartels making use of Indian reservation land that is not patrolled very
Yeah.
much at all, if at all.
Unprotected kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not patrolled, and um, normal federal and state law enforcement tends to stay away unless they
Absolutely have to
hot
go in.
pursued or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Unless they have to do something, right? There's the tribal police can be often overwhelmed by cartel level resources. So I bring some of that into the book. Lance has those problems. Well, he's got a squadron now in Kandahar and uh, prosecuting missions to find labs and do other things like that. And so it really, I think, weaves an interesting story. Uh, I'm even surprised I was able to bring the plot points together, and it's like, yeah, okay, tie them up. And as you know, it ends in New York City, and New York City is a great foil for any kind of setting, for any kind of book you want to write, right? I think it's the most TV, movie, book written city in the world, I think, or one of the top five for sure, besides London, Paris, some other places like that. Yeah.
Toronto's a big one. I've read that a lot of shows that you think are based in New York are actually shot in Toronto because it's so similar to what downtown Manhattan looks
Mhm.
like that
Yeah.
they can pull that off. And I'm like, well, you're a big city when they do movies and TV about you, but they don't film it there.
Right.
Like it's
Well,
just too
it's
much.
funny
They gotta go
because
somewhere else.
I was a big X-Files fan, and yeah, they had some shots around Bethesda and Virginia, Northern Virginia, and around DC and things like that. But I think it was all mostly shot in Vancouver, and
Yeah.
not the Washington State Vancouver, but on the other side. And so yeah, Canada was very pro production, and most people don't know, but I believe there's a Space Needle in Toronto that
Oh,
is similar, or something close to it. But anyway, um, yeah, it's interesting that uh, within the book, I just do this research and pick pieces out of real life and things that are going on, um, and so I'm hoping to learn how to write maybe less characters and a more focused story. But so far, that's not my style of writing. I have it as one of those things I'd like to try sometime, but right now I'm writing the fourth in the book in the Shadow Tier series, and I'll just give a little highlight here that Lance is in Cuba,
ooh,
and
I love Cuba.
so
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome. You know what I've
and
done when I felt like I've kind of gone a little too far, like off the rails, with too much character, too much story, or something like that. I always have these little ideas, and I've started Word documents, and I said I'm going to turn this idea into a novella, even if that novella one day, you know, flourishes into a full book. My intent is to try to write a novella. So a novella's got to be quick. It's got to be action packed. There's not a lot of room for character development and world building and all that. So I find that it kind of narrows my focus back down. So that if I'm talking, I'm too long winded and things like that, I try to go back to those novellas and add to them and kind of get my mind back into that. And um, somebody in my thriller book critique group told me about that. They were like, go write a short story. If you ever feel like you're talking too much and you're expounding too much and you're just doing too much, he's like, go try to write a short story and challenge yourself to just keep it simple. I was like, that's really good advice because it just helps you kind of recenter. You know what I mean? And I thought that was really cool. And then as I've read some novellas, I'm like, man, they're so much different than a full novel because it's 25, 30,000 words compared to 90 to 100. You know, you
Hmm.
don't have any more, you don't have a lot of room. You have to tell the story and you have to get it out fast, but you still need to do little things like a little bit of character development, a little bit of character background. They got to know who it is and connect to them too. So I found that that's really kind of helped me in some of my other writing because I was able to kind of recenter and focus back on the action.
That's an interesting idea because I've read everything that Brad Taylor's written, all his major books, and now I've
Mm-hmm.
started reading his novellas. And in his novellas, he's able to use that to explain how Knuckles got his nickname, you
Yeah,
know, and um, the little bit more of the genesis of Blaisdell Consulting, those kind of things, or the consulting company that Pike and Jennifer have, things like
yeah,
that. Antiquities company. So yeah, it's an interesting idea to you could do those and if insert them in a series and do a little more flesh out of a backstory or some other event that people will connect into the main series and different things like that.
yeah. And I think Chris Haughey did. He did one a book or two ago called Insurrection Day, and he released it like I think 4 or 5 months before his next book came out, and it was about the January 6th insurrection, but it was done from like Haley Chill's point of view about how things were kind of going, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't very political. You would think it would be, but it wasn't very political. But it was very much her side of things and how things went and how she was kind of chasing down some people. And obviously, it was fiction, so it wasn't 100% the truth. But it
Mm-hmm.
just was a very it had nothing to do really with the series, the Haley Chill series. It was just kind of a day in her life, and I thought that was really cool because it connected you, the reader, to her so much more, and it didn't, like I said, it didn't really have anything to do with the next book, but I thought it was a very timely thing for him to do because it really kind of just, hey, you remember Haley Chill? Remember, this is a day in her life, and it just really kind of connected. And I thought that was super cool, um, and I'd love to see more authors do that, but I think that is a little bit of a publisher thing. I don't think they exactly, um, want to do the novellas. There's probably not a ton of money in it,
Yeah, yeah.
but um, so let's talk more about Shadow Sanction. A little bit more about that. So um, this time, Lance is kind of attacked on the home front. This resurgent cartel kind of punches him in the mouth right there on the reservation, like you said. And, he wants to go full blown. Okay, got to protect my people. Here we go. And then the phone rings. The president calls and says, we got a problem. War on drugs. We got to shut off the Taliban. This opium thing is funding terrorism. Like you said, it starts in 2003. This is a bit of an issue, and so he's torn. How did you really describe the emotion in that? Because Lance is a very passionate person when it comes to his people, and then now he's being told, "Forget about that. Come over here and do your job."
Yeah, he struggles through that, right? That dialogue he has with Parker, Ellie Parker, his now wife, um, and they really, as a former soldier and now leader of operations there at Shadow Tier, under General Davidson, he struggles with that. It's like and he is right on the edge of uh, it's like it's funny how all of a sudden training missions start being slotted for Montana and the reservation instead of other places, and so he's walking a tightrope between misappropriation of government funds, trying to help his people, and at the same time, he's got the orders from the president, get on the opium issue with the
Right.
Taliban, and luckily this is part of this book is about Lance's transition, the start of Lance's transition from being a team leader, shooter, you know, kind of person to now he's going to have to step back. He's got multiple squadrons. He's not happy with all the paperwork and the PowerPoints he's got to do because Shadow Tier still is, under SOCOM, Big Brother SOCOM there in Tampa, and he's not happy about that side. So emotionally, he's pretty centered and what we might call stoic,
Mm-hmm.
but it's tearing him up on the inside, especially because I bring in the real life fact that cartel members are marrying into these tribes, and getting partial, technically, quote, ownership, or they're becoming part of the tribe, and it's a real issue
Right.
that's been reported before, and he sees the erosion of the culture and his people, and that's what drives him to do things right up on the edge, depending on your viewpoint. And man, if there was a congressman who got wind of it, kind of thing, it could be disastrous both for himself and Ellie, but also for the unit, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he does struggle with that, and but first and foremost, he really believes he can help. He believes he can help his people and still get the other job done because he's surrounded by good people and people he trusts with his life. So,
So what did you do to kind of scale up the action in this one? Because Shadow Tier was action packed, and as you said, this is a little more of Lance doing those administrative things as being a leader, being a guy in charge. How did you still bring the action with maybe less time to do it?
yeah. So there's a lot in this book that has to do with my interaction with the SAS and my previous life, and um, different things like that. So I'm able to connect some dots and get Lance, for example, as you read, gets by name requested to be part of a mission that was a real world mission. Early on in the war in Afghanistan, the SAS, Prime Minister Tony Blair sent the SAS over, but they really didn't get used for anything. So they, in real life, went home. And Tony Blair complained, like, I sent the whole squadron over, and they just did a couple things. I'm not leaving them over there. And so they were given that real world mission where they literally flew in 8 C-130s worth of their pinkies, their gun jeeps, and things like that. And so um, Lance Lance gets by name requested to do what Lance does best. Lance's number one capability is recon, surveillance. Right, he can go in deep, solo or with the team, and really is good at that part of what we call advanced force operations. And I'm able to use those kind of constructs, things that happen in real life. People get by name selected and asked to be part of a mission and things like that. Um, to get him out away from and create tension about his feelings for not being able to be there right on the reservation when after their first missions the cartel retaliates right against the security forces of the reservation. So I use some of those kinds of um, I don't know, techniques or ideas in my writing to create more tension. Right? He really just wants to be on the Crow reservation, taking care of his people, and he gets yanked away. And it's you don't you don't disobey an order from the president. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
no, it's not optional.
not optional, exactly. And that's really where the tension and the part that drives him to somewhat of distraction. That and then some of the close combat and what happens for example, when they're on that mission with the SAS and what happens and how it affects him directly, right? So, um, yeah, it is keeping up the action um, when you're on three continents working against cartels of the Taliban. Um, he's bringing every resource he can to the fight, and that even includes some unconventional resources from a place you wouldn't expect, right? With his friend, the general, and what they do to sort of help set the stage to determine where the drugs are going, how they're being distributed, and then taking that awfully strange step that they take to get into the middle of that environment, and with the CIA's help on deep cover story and stuff like that.
So where is Lance going now that we've seen? The first book was kind of, he was on the attack. The second book here, Shadow Sanction, he is a little more gripping with being a leader, his, family being attacked, his people being attacked, and then having this order from the president. Um, where's the evolution of Lance going to go in books 3 and 4 without giving us too many spoilers?
Sure. Depending on how we sequence the books, um, Lance and the team um, in the third book get pulled get pulled off a bit of their traditional counter drug mission into a bioweapon situation.
Okay.
And funny story, the bad guy is creating, and I read a lot of the same books. It's funny again. I read a lot of the same books that Jack Carr did for his book, but the my the bad guy is creating a chimera, a two-part bioweapon that you get a little sick and it looks like you're recovering, but you're really not. So he's trying to create this. It's very hard to create a chimera when two pathogens, these pathogens are so deadly, they don't like to live together, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But I have him doing it in an old Titan missile silo complex.
Okay.
There's one right here near Buckley Air Force Base, about 3 miles from my house. And my wife said I couldn't write the story here. Don't give the bad guys ideas.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Yeah, yeah. So there weren't that many back in the early Titan days. Arkansas, believe it or not, Northern California. So just north of Chico, where the big Paradise Fire was a couple years ago in California, there's there's lots of air bases in California, but Beale and right there's an old Titan silo. So some interesting stuff goes on there. A lot of the book takes place in the Chico, Sacramento, Redwoods, San Francisco area. So that was fun to write because that's home for me. I was
Mm.
born in Northern California, so I get goosebumps thinking about writing about that area. It's just a lot of fun since I know it so well. Uh, the other book I'm writing, and I'm like 60K words into, is happens later. So I'm sort of at this point hopping to books about every 3 years, and we're still before El Chapo ends up in the Florence Supermax, Florence,
Mm-hmm.
Colorado Supermax down the road. Unfortunately, I don't get to visit him. I'd love to have a conversation with Shorty at some point, but
Wow. Yeah.
yeah. But uh, Lance is chasing El Chapo in Cuba, and so for various reasons. And so Lance, I mean, going into Mexico, right in the first book, it's I call it semi-permissive, right? You've got some agreement from the Mexican government that you can go after the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, right? With them in support, but this book finds Lance and Ellie in a non-permissive environment, the equal of East Germany, right? Back in the day, not the Stasi. Um, in the day, it was called Directorate General Intelligence, right? Their version of the Stasi or the KGB, the Cuban KGB. It's now called G2. But so I've got them involved, and they're that going from these being able to operate in these areas. Number one, because we've invaded Afghanistan, or it's Marseille, it's France. It's it's not an everyday environment gets you killed. Now
Yeah.
they're in an environment where may not get them killed, but it get them in jail for a long time or prison, right? More than likely, if the Cubans catch them, and then trying to work in a non-permissive environment and get after El Chapo, uh, is sort of like you're looking over both shoulders, right? And you've got to be aware of what you're doing and how you do it, so you're not leaving a trail. So there's a lot more tension in this. Lance is doing what Lance does, but the fact that Ellie wasn't going to let him go without her going, number one, because profiling with a couple is a lot softer, right? Things like that, all that. So it's an interesting write, um, and there's some things that I have. Lance has evolved, but he's also just still bent on. He got Eliana. In theory, he put her back in the cartel as a confidential informant, but he got her brother. He damaged El Chapo's business, and he's just really got this mindset that the world's going to be a lot better if I can get rid of Shorty, right? El Chapo, Mr. Guzman's off the planet or locked up in prison. Even if it's the Cubans, that's great.
Yeah.
But once again, he's getting pressured from a new president who's got an advisor that's a lot softer on drugs. And why do we need shadow tier? We've got State Department, we got the DEA,
Okay.
and so there's proving your worth. And
Yeah.
I wrote, I started writing this book some time ago, and now there's been recent things on the border with barriers they're putting in the water and things like that. And I'd written a scene that starts off the book that includes a similar idea down at South Padre Island, South Bay, that portion of Texas, and it's just a pure reaction that goes bad against those narco subs and things like that. And so it's a lot of fun writing it. I'm playing around with a first person, third person kind of narrative, like Brad Taylor does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and it's easier for me to read than it is to write it, because I find myself slipping into third person. you know,
That's hard. That's hard to
yeah,
keep the singular point of view, or if you're doing two, that's even harder. But yeah, I
yeah,
find it. I find myself doing that too.
yeah, yeah. I like it when I read it, though. So that's what's going on there. And got some other ideas floating around and things like that. Um, so yeah, it's still a lot of fun writing.
Oh
I
yeah.
enjoy it. Just the ability to continually ideate, and just think of things and go, well, that, like you said, like that'd be interesting. I'll throw it into a Word document, put it in my notebook. Somehow I get it down on paper,
Yeah.
and I look back and I might not use it, but it was fun to think about it at the time. I don't consider myself that creative, but um, like I tested out very high for in all my tests in the military and other commercial tests I've taken for making things, improving things. So my ideas often come from real world things, and how if I tweak it a little bit, I can make something interesting out of it, I think.
Yeah.
But that's why I have that's why I have beta readers and people that go, that doesn't work.
Right.
you know,
Yeah. That's
keep me
a
keep me grounded after all my because otherwise it might end up at science fiction somehow, I think.
yeah.
So
Exactly. So Shadow Sanction comes out August 30th. You went to Thriller Fest this year. I think we're gonna see each other at BouchCon here in a couple weeks.
yep.
But before I let you go, tell people a little bit about where they can find you at, and tell them about the newsletter, because you do some awesome stuff in the newsletter.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Stratton Books on Twitter. I'm Steven Stratton on Instagram. My website's Stephen Stratton, that's with a V, Stephen Stratton, USA.com is my website. And I do put out a newsletter. Um, and every month I do 5 top things, Steve's 2 cents. Um, I do a quote from the book that's about to be published. I do a character profile, and then during the middle of the month, I'll throw some other things in. But Steve Squadron, you can sign up to become a member, get the newsletter, and that also puts you in the running for, like, as this, we're doing an art giveaway. And the grand prize this year, instead of fishing in Colorado, is I will pay for somebody to come join me at a Broncos football game in the 19th row in the middle of the field. Real nice seats. Yeah, and I've got 4 games to pick from, and then I'll pay for their lodging and airfare out. Yeah, we have a lot of fun, and I appreciate everybody's support who does ask for an ARC and or give me feedback. I love feedback from my readers. If you find a typo, or if I just like lost the ball on something, I'd love to learn about that. It's because it's all good feedback. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's SteveStrattonUSA.com. From there, you can find all the other details on social media. The newsletter is totally worth it. Steve does one of the top newsletters, in my opinion. Lots of raffles and giveaways, and, can't really, whether you're a Denver Broncos fan or not, getting to go watch an NFL game on the 19th row and have it paid for is a pretty sweet deal. So go sign up for Steve Squadron. Steve, it was a blast, man. I'll see you in a couple weeks. We'll share beers again at BoucherCon, and we'll chat and catch up. But, man, thank you so much for this, and I wish you the best of luck on Shadow Sanction releasing.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you. Ellie's already got our restaurants picked out. We're going to have a good time.
Oh, yes.
Take care, Jeff. Thanks.